Okay, thanks very much, Peter, and good morning to everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are in the world. My name is Rob Grant. I'm the Consumer Insight Manager here at Campbell's in Australia, where I look after the soup, stock and juice portfolio. And also beside me is Erica van Lieven, who's the Managing Director at Direction First, who are one of our close partner research agencies. So um, today we're going to be talking about the role and application of market research online communities, sometimes known as MROCs, which sounds a bit trendier. And we're talking about these based on a real-life case study, based on a need that we had as a business, and which Direction First using MROCs helped us with. What I'd like to do first of all is just present the challenge from us as a business, but I think it's probably a challenge which many businesses would understand. Certainly FMCG businesses, but there are others as well facing us in these sort of slightly challenging economic times. Um, I think the first thing to mention is that the business landscape in Australia at the moment, and I would imagine it's similar in the rest of the world, is fiercely competitive, particularly in FMCG, and that's really putting it mildly. We have competing issues such as low consumer confidence, although it is rising slightly, downward pressure on prices, dominance of a small, very small in our case, number of retailers, a pretty strict regulatory environment, and also the rising cost of goods are pressuring brands and their P&Ls in particular from a lot of different angles. So brands are really looking for ways to break through, cut through this clutter, and get ahead of the game. So in order to rise above this, torrid sea of challenges, brands really need to do what brands do best and enact game-changing strategies. So the classic disciplines of brand positioning, communication strategy, new product development or service development, to name just a few, must really work harder than ever to add value to consumers' lives beyond just saving a buck or two. I think in this area there's three things that brands need from consumer insight functions and their partners, rather than just being information. I'd like to go through these three areas now. Firstly, and this sounds obvious, is that they need to be truly different from what already exists. They really need to stand out. I think brand strategies, and particularly when they're applied to innovation, rely on fresh, new, what I like to call springy insights, insights that create that aha moment and just ladder into potentially a brand campaign or an MPD strategy. Certainly consumers are not interested in hearing the old cliches in tired categories they've heard before. They're looking for things that are new and different and things that can make a difference in their lives. I think secondly, any brand strategies and new ideas need to be ahead of the curve. In fact, they need to be some way ahead of the curve. Particularly in FMCG, I know our development timelines for MPD can range from 6 months to a year to 2 to 3 years, depending on how complex it is. So it's no longer good enough to just ask a mass market group of consumers what they bought last year, what they bought the year before, or even the week before, because by the time you get something to market based on those insights, it's going to be too late. It's going to be very too late. So what we like to do is to focus here on more leading edge consumers, more the mavens or the early adopters, depending on which theory you've been reading, because they often hold the answer to what will be happening in the future. As William Gibson said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So that small segment of people who are already doing things ahead of the curve, the people we need to engage, but that's not easy. Lastly, brands need to be deeply connected to the lives of consumers. This means their minds, needs, behaviours and desires at a fairly intimate level. Invariably, this involves spending quality time with consumers, allowing them to be themselves and giving them the freedom to express themselves and express their feelings. If you combine these three things together, it raises a big challenge for businesses, and particularly the consumer insight functions. Requiring approaches that spot the uniqueness in a sea of sameness, engaging with consumers at a sharp end of the adoption curve, and forming deeper relationships with people is not easy. A lot of the traditional methods that we use suffer from only providing known answers to known questions. I remember I attended an Australian Market Research Society conference a couple of years ago by John Griffiths. He talked about how many insights were backwards looking, explaining why things happened, as opposed to how things can change. In contrast, the methods that we do have in our arsenal to deliver to all these aims, and I'm thinking of things like truly immersive qualitative research, ethnography, cultural forecasting, trend hunting, and so on. These things are pretty demanding of time and budget. I'm sure I'm not the only consumer insight manager here seeing cuts and squeezes in both budget and personnel, so it's hard to dedicate resources to these types of activities. I think if all that wasn't bad enough, we have the challenges that, particularly in these slightly difficult times, people are having a fear of new methods. It's a risk-averse era which we live in. So approaches that aren't proven to deliver the kinds of insights that people are looking for, especially if they're investment heavy. So people often just fall back to the traditional old ways of doing things, which kind of gives some kind of answer, but maybe it's not the one you're looking for. So that raised the question, where do brands turn for fresh, connected, future-focused insights? Or, a specific example that we had with Campbell's, where do we look for unique, forward-looking and deeply connected insight platforms to leverage into our meal business in developing new products and recipe strategy? And so, this is a classic business scenario where what we need to do then is bring in our agency partners to help try and handle the problem. And so at this point I'll hand over to Erica, who'll go through the rest of the paper.
Okay, so thanks Rob. He threw the ball, we grabbed it. Before I go into the specifics of how our market research online community, or MROC for short, helped Rob and Campbell's, I'd like to briefly talk about MROCs in general and what makes it. Firstly, I just need to get control of my slides. Hang on. Whoops. Right, there we go. Sorry about that, folks. Firstly, you may have heard of different definitions of what an MROC is. Our approach is to use them as a online qualitative tool. This means we don't use it as a panel to do research. We use a group of 50 to 150 engaged people. Online, they're joined by a common passion, a brand or a subject, interested, and they're interesting to talk to. We bring them together for a length of time, say 3 weeks or 3 months, in an asynchronous setting, meaning they're not all asked to respond at the same time. They respond to posts and activities in their own time over the period, which could be weeks or months, in waves of activity. We use MROCs for creation and structure with consumers in an ongoing basis that goes beyond standard research approaches. Is they bring real people and their real stories and emotions into the creative space. Thinking techniques make consumers think harder, leading up to 7 times richer data. The approach allows participants to think and contribute in their own environment, where they're probably using your product. It offers the opportunity to really get to know the consumers in a deep way. Things that may suggest new ideas, in collaboration. Participants can be involved anytime, any putting in much. It's always on research in connection with consumers. This is vital to quick decision making that we need these days. Importantly, it's also real research. We see what's really happening in their kitchen, not just what they tell us or of mind. MROC we used in this case study. It's important to know that there isn't a single template for MROCs. One template doesn't fit all clients' needs. We adapt and change what the client needs or what the objectives might be for any specific project. So, in answering the brief for Rob and Campbell's, we knew we needed to speak to real foodies, passionate about cooking and eating, who are eager to food trends. We therefore decided to speak to mavens, people who know and love their subject, in this instance food, and are willing and keen to share their knowledge. In this way, as mavens are more influential, we can better help Campbell's identify future trends to stay ahead of that curve, particularly in NPD, as Rob said. Our approach was to recruit 50 mavens to our Come Dine With Me Australia community for 3 weeks to talk about how they choose, prepare, cook and eat their everyday evening meal. Here you can see login screen for our Come Dine With Me community. It consisted of 4 virtual rooms. Each had a different purpose, which I'll take you through. The richer insights generated from the community really allowed us to delve deep into the participants' lives for those 3 weeks. I'm going to show you some of these insights in a visual way through the virtual rooms. First of all, let's go into the lounge. This is the lounge where our mavens were left completely moderated to their own devices to meet and greet each other. It was an extremely important room. Here they chatted, built trust, shared recipes, inspired each other. They collaborated and connected here extremely well, bonded by their common love of food, and enjoyed sharing news about it, and hear from some of their comments. The room empowered them to just themselves. It allowed us to observe natural conversations and language used, resulting in much more relevant and powerful insights being gained. Okay, so let's go into the next room, the kitchen, where we explored what foods were in our Maven's kitchen. We were able to delve into their homes, where photos of cupboards, fridges, and meals they made did all of the talking. We're not relying on recall participants over or underclaiming, which can happen in other research approaches. The photos here of their cupboards showed that although our Mavens told us that they're seeking fresh food more than ever, what they did not talk about was a huge space that shelf-stable products played in keeping their everyday meals on track. Shelf-stable products provide convenience, shortcuts, and value, things that are extremely important for today's consumer who is balancing a busy life with the desire for tasty foods. Shortcuts really make a difference, but shelf-stable foods are not often top of mind in the chatter about everyday meals. In the photos of the inside of their fridges, we were able to see clearly that they were full of fresh food. It takes up a lot of space in their fridge and in their conversations. Their conversations revealed that health and fitness, without compromising on taste, are more important than ever. People are trying to be more in control of what goes into their diet for many reasons. When they do buy pre-prepared foods, often for time-saving shortcuts, they want only the main ingredients, clearly stated, giving them transparency of what they're adding to meals and facilitating their ability to add their own taste touch through fresh ingredients. The meals they cooked showed the variety of cooking styles they have, the different cuisines they try. Overall, they demonstrated a love of cooking and adding their own taste touches to the food they make, an important part of today's growing passions in the food society. Now let's have a look at where our Mavens are getting most of their inspiration from for what they're cooking and eating. First of all, Mum's cooking and her recipes are often the beginning in a very popular place. Its comfort food brings back positive emotional memories, where you come from, who you grew up with, what Mum cooked, styles and family favourites. These are very important influences for today's foodies. TV programs like MasterChef are now extremely influential, making more variety of food and dishes accessible. They help increase confidence and the likelihood of people to try new things. Recipes from magazines and books are still used lots and are now augmented by websites like taste.com, which have over 24,000 recipes, all rated and graded by their users, as well as what people are cooking today. This increases accessibility to new dishes, variety, and new ingredients. Now let's take a quick look at where we looked to identify future trends for brands and their products. It was clear from listening and observing that people talked very emotionally and passionately about food. Food is something everyone experiences, and it has a real emotional impact in daily lives. This means it's important for food brands to consider how they make people feel. Brands don't think about how they make people feel may find a growing disconnect between them and their customers in the future. I'm going to hand back to Rob in a second, who will share some of the insights we gained. However, just before I do, I'm going to show you some images from a video uploaded by one of our participants. Unfortunately, we can't play the video for you during the webinar. The technology just won't allow it. So we've taken a few screenshots to give you a feel for what he showed us. Meet John, our male cook, who decided he was going to make pumpkin soup for the first time. He was previously very much a meat specialist. He videoed the whole affair for us. He was pretty excited about making his soup. It ended in disaster. He did not manage the hot soup in the blender well at all. In his haste to blend and finish this soup he couldn't wait to try, it exploded all over his kitchen. It was funny to see, and we loved his enthusiasm in the task. However, it was also instructive and informative. Often food manufacturers are keen to develop recipes. However, you need to think about the small things that happen, the equipment being used, the interaction of hot food and blending, things that some take for granted and others may not have considered or come across before. These things can have a big impact on success and failure, and in this instance, the time it took to prepare and clean up the meal.
Hello. Hopefully I'm back on again, and what I'd like to do just to wrap up the paper is to just share with you three platforms that we discovered through just to give you a taste, if you pardon, of how useful was. We, after decades. Okay, sorry. For decades of products becoming more complex, modified, processed, and so on, we were looking for the opposite. Culinary education through MasterChef, My Kitchen Rules, and I'm sure similar shows around the world, giving people start out with more basic, wholesome, high-quality, natural ingredients, and build the dish and build the flavour from there. Really was a case of less is more. And secondly, we found that lots of emerging brands, particularly inspired of course, are really connecting with consumers emotionally with quite rich language and descriptions of where the product is made, how it's sourced, where ingredients come from. Often mainstream brands are failing to stand when competing on sort of more similar numerical rational claims. So 90% fat-free, or they try and tell consumers this is tasty or this is delicious, rather than explaining why it's delicious in terms of how it's been made, where the food has come from. Thirdly, we found, and we recognised that at best brands have a real role in making people's lives, in their own little way, a little bit special. It's never more true in the food space. A tip from a chef, a recipe from a famous way to simply use an exotic ingredient are all things everyday people can access in their daily lives, particularly with lots of people facing financial pressures and uncertainty in work and so on. These little special moments they can have at home, cost effectively, are really valuable. Interestingly, we took a couple of these platform areas and crashed them together, the first and third. And out of it, if anyone's in Australia or if anyone wants to go online and have a look, we just launched Campbell's Real Stock no added salt product, endorsed, and actually, and part of the creation of the product was using Manu Fidel, the big celebrity chef in Australia. And so we took the insight of people looking for control and making their own ingredients from scratch, with the feeling of being on the secret of a celebrity chef, and we launched that product. It's in a marketplace now, and only been out for a few months, but it's doing very well. Looking at MROCs in more general terms, I think we found what a fantastic way they were to connect with people, normal, regular people in their own environments. Certainly with techniques put a lens over people that affects the way they respond and behave. I'm sure we've all seen various papers that talk to that. But an MROC at its best just allows them to be themselves, resulting in more relevant and more powerful insights. Finally, we spoke about the fear and trepidation of using new methods. Well, the good thing about MROCs is that they come with certain built-in safety guards. So from the outset, if you start with a small 3-week community, you're only investing what you might for a handful of qualitative research groups. So it's not a big investment, so the risk is less. They also allow you to be part of the process. You can literally watch the insights as they unfold. You can adapt, intervene, pause, restart again, and change the course of things as they move through. And you can start small, and they can be enlarged as confidence builds, more people can be added, more tasks and tools can be built into the system as the results start coming in. And so I believe that all of this allows you to enter this bold new world, baby step by baby step. Okay, thanks.